I I was amazed at them all being together, kind of the kindred spirit, the open arms with which we were accepted. Uh, we had some trepidation. I'd like for them to talk a little bit about it. When he was arrested in Philadelphia, we were on record as opposing the death penalty. I hadn't expected to get into this tonight at all, but we opposed the death penalty and got into a bit of a kerfuffle with the DA and to the police to some extent. Had a very public tit for tat in the press, and ultimately we prevailed. And one of our concerns when we went out there was that we realized I can't begin to explain or fully understand what Kristen and Chris and Cassidy and everybody else went through, but can understand how they might feel about what should happen to the guy that was doing this, whatever you want to call him. And we were a little bit concerned that some people might be upset that we had put a roadblock in the way of having this guy put to death. And we actually were accepted with, I think I would characterize, open arms and relief for what we...
Welcome back to another episode of Cold Red. I'm Ray Carr, and with me always is Fitz. Fitz, how are you?
I'm doing good, Ray. Good, hope you are too.
This season here at Cold Red, we're dedicating the entire season to a case that both Fitz and I had the opportunity to work when we were at the FBI. It's called the Center City Rapist case. We've had some very interesting guests on who have been directly involved in the case, and even some of those that have been involved in its aftermath. Today, Fitz and I would like to welcome back retired Philadelphia homicide detective Chuck Boyle and Sylvester Schieber, the father of Shannon Schieber, to further discuss some of the things in the Center City Rapist case. We also have some extraordinary guests who are with us today that were with us last week on Cold Red. They introduced themselves. One is Chris and the other is Kristen. We also had a letter last week that Cassidy provided that told us her story as well. And we heard from both our ladies. They kind of set the scene in the early 2000s, what was going on. And although we understand Chris and Kristen about the events and how painful they can be, I guess I have a question. After the assault, and everybody goes through these different things, what was the most difficult thing for you to navigate?
For me, I'll say that it was not just the physical violation, but the violation of my home where I'm supposed to be safe. And it shattered that. And to be honest with you, all these years later, I still, when I pull into my garage at night, I shut off my vehicle, I keep my doors locked, and I watch as my garage door closes. Nobody rolls underneath of it and ends up in my garage with me. Closes. This is something that stays with you forever. I am getting ready to make a move into a new home, and I already know that I'm going to have a lot of anxiety because every house has its own noises and street sounds and things like that, and I am going to be on edge, and I'm going to be dealing with some anxiety until I learn those things. There are just some things, and to be honest with you, there are things that you think immediately right after, I'm never going to be able to do that again. I'm never going to be able to go out after dark. It took a long time for me to go out after dark. And then you do it once, and you're like, okay, I just got a little bit more of my power back. I just got a little bit of that control that he took away from me back. And with they're minor. To other people, they're minor. They're not a big deal. But to a victim of sexual assault and rape, those are huge things. And we have to applaud ourselves for being able to do those things that everyone else can kind of take for granted. I think for me, even after he was arrested, I had a lot of people in my life saying, you must feel so much relief and you must feel so much better and you don't have to be afraid anymore. And I said, no, now I know firsthand that there are people out there like this, and there's more than just him. Then you end up spending your life being very diligent about your own personal safety because the fear is that it happens to you again. So I think it's important. I had a gentleman friend at the time of my assault. He's no longer a friend. He stopped being a friend very quickly because I believe it was maybe a month or two after, and I had moved out of my apartment into the same apartment in the same complex, but on a second floor. I thought, well, if I'm on a second floor, I'll feel better. And then the second floor, one of the victims in Fort Collins lived on a second floor. And then I told my husband, we got to move. We got to move. We got to move completely out of apartment living, whatever we need to do. But I had a male friend who called me up and said, how are you doing? And I said, I'm not okay. Like, I'm terrified all the time. I'm not sleeping. I lay on the couch all night long and I can't sleep because I'm afraid to close my eyes. And he said to me, wow, you're not over this yet? And like I said, he's no longer a friend. He stopped being a friend in that second. But I think that a lot of TV shows and things that sort of tackle this subject want to put a pretty bow on it at the end and everybody's okay. And I'm not going to say that I haven't done a lot of healing and a lot of therapy, by the way, in order to get to that point. But it doesn't go away. You just learn how to live with it. You learn how to maneuver through it for the rest of your life.
Kristen, how about you?
Well, agree with everything that Chris said. I know that for me personally, especially early on after the assault, just a few weeks later, 9/11 happened. And so it was just, you didn't trust your home. You didn't trust the outside world. It just was a lot of heavy. I didn't go back to the townhome. My uncle and my dad packed everything up and I moved back home with my parents and said, adios, Fort Collins. And the first little stretch was very challenging. Sleep was very little after that. And it was hard to even take a shower because you couldn't hear what was going on within the home. So all of those and going out at night was definitely something that took a long time. I moved back up there in January of 2002 to Fort Collins with 3 guys next to a police officer. So Troy Grace had not been caught yet, but I was determined to still go to school and finish what I had started. Then he was caught that April and things definitely felt a little bit easier to maneuver. Like Chris says, it stays with you. I moved from Colorado. It's been 10 years now. To the south, Georgia, then to Alabama, and then back to Georgia 3 times in 5 years. And all of the moving, you have to readjust to sounds and neighbors and just the area of trying to trust and be extra cautious. So, and I've honestly shared my experience with my daughter and her friends at a younger age, just because I think it's so important to, yes, we live in a lovely community in a small town and nothing like that happens here. But it's like, oh, no, you need to always be self-aware and be as safe as possible. Yeah.
I want to throw something out. When in the aftermath of something like this that happens, you receive a lot of help. Well, I hope that you receive help. And conversely,
for me, it was
that are either said or done that are not very helpful. What is let's look at the positive end first. What is
most definitely?
What is the one positive thing that you could take away that you thought was very helpful to you?
Yeah.
And trying to work
and it
through
was
this after something like this happened.
We had therapy.
Probably the support of the other girls
through
being able to connect with the other ladies that experienced the exact same thing.
I lost it for a second.
For me was very helpful.
You lean on those that are closest to you.
Right,
you find
initially they didn't want you talking to the other girls.
Can trust.
Right.
I was very lucky to have Ryan's dad for the time that I did.
At
the same time, you feel completely alone. I mean, you can be surrounded by people. I will never forget when I came home from having my rape exam and I came into my front door with my husband and my entire family was sitting in my living room. And I have a large family, 3 sisters, my parents, their husbands, some of their, dear close friends. And I walked in the room and I felt like I am no longer the person that they've known. And I felt like no one in that room could understand me and that I was completely alone. Honestly, I'm going to tell you that first year, I struggled a lot. I drank too much. I was numbing whenever I didn't have to be on duty as a mom, I was numbing because I couldn't deal with all of those fears. I couldn't deal with being home alone. I couldn't deal with just normal life. And I was in therapy. I was going to therapy 2 days a week. And my focus on my therapy was, how do I make myself okay so that I can take care of my child? And it took a really long time for me to find any real sense of safety again. And we're talking years. And I was very, very thankful to have the therapy because it did help. It gave me tools to deal with triggers. It gave me tools to be able to calm myself out of those re-victimization moments where you feel like you're right back in that office that night with him. And I mean, I will always be an advocate for therapy. I think that if anyone has had to deal with this, they need help. They need tools. They need to figure out how they can move through it, not past it, but through it to the other side. Yeah, because I was the third victim,
Chris, if I can
every
ask you,
time there would be another assault, I sort of had to relive it.
At some point, you found out,
and I was in
that a man
regular
was
contact with Kim
for
Cochran.
Your sexual assault. How did that happen? And was that any sort of demarcation line in your life? You kind of mentioned it quickly last episode. And of course, at some point, I think in the courtroom for the first time,
he was the
you
detective.
were in his presence, I believe. Can you walk us through a little bit of how you first found out, media coverage, things like that?
Oh my God, I just totally forgot your question. I'm sorry. Can you ask me again? So after my son's dad passed away, my mother-in-law stayed with me for about 10 days.
You just said that she's a sergeant with the Fort Collins Police.
I think it was the first night I had to spend alone in my home.
At that time,
with just me and my son.
Detective.
And my mom actually called me at 7:00 in the morning, and she said, "Kim's trying to get a hold of you."
How did you
Kim
find
had been
out
trying
about
to
the
call,
arrest?
but actually finally sleeping.
How did you find out about the arrest?
I said, okay. And she said, you need to call her. You need to call her. And I called Kim Cochran, and she simply said to me, I'm standing here looking at him. We got him. We have DNA. We have his prints, I think, or his DNA. And we've got him. Oh yeah. And I remember feeling relieved. I remember feeling that I'm glad he can't hurt anyone else. I'm glad I don't have to get any more phone calls from her telling me they're the victim. I'm glad that there's a light at the end of this tunnel finally. There was definite relief. And I'll say again, it didn't make me feel better. It made me feel like at least he can't hurt anyone else.
Kristen, we were asking about how Chris found out of the arrest and how that was handled with you. And was that any sort of an emotional wall that you can get over or door you could close? I know kind of it wasn't completely, but could you just walk us through a little bit when that news came to you and how?
Yes. When Kim called and said she was 99.9% sure that she had him in custody, I just thanked her up and down and felt tremendous relief because I had initially moved home and then back up there to Fort Collins. From January to April, I just was paranoid about, is this him? Is this him? Is this him? So I was so thankful to know that any stranger I passed by was not him,
and I
that
think
it
it's
was
important
that he was caught. And again, same as
I know it's been
Chris,
mentioned
that he was not going to be able to hurt other people.
That a certain point in Fort
I'm
Collins,
someone who likes as much closure as possible.
With all of us,
so
us know
right away,
that
we had the information of where this suspect lived. So I asked my good friend to drive me over there because I wanted to know where he was living.
I remember finding that out.
So there was his little brick house with two little chairs in the back, and I was shocked to find out that he was married and all of the
violated
things.
my space and my safety, but he had taken the life of another woman. And it was disgusting to have to add murderer to his already title of serial rapist. At the same time, when I found that out, I sort of felt a little bit of vindication that I didn't fight back that night, that my gut was right when it told me, just get through this and stay alive for your son. And I almost hate saying that around Syl because I want more than anything for them to not have lost their daughter. And sometimes I wonder if Shannon wasn't the one speaking to me that night saying, don't fight back.
No.
Still, Chris just referenced you. You've heard
Actually, I
Cassidy's
think it was
letter
Kristen.
through Ray in the last episode, and you've heard both Chris and Kristen tonight. You're, of course, the father to whom she's referring, who lost the daughter to this reprobate. I don't even like using his name. Others can say it. Just feel free to give us anything you're feeling right now, or about Chris and Kristen, or whatever.
Well, we went out to Fort Collins shortly after he was sentenced out there, so he'd already been sentenced in Philadelphia, and actually had dinner at Chris Marshall's house, and everybody was there, but I believe number 2, and her parents were there that night. Was it Kristen?
My parents were there, but I wasn't able to be there.
Okay. I know there was one missing. Yes, now you're right, because I actually chatted at length with number 2, who had a hard time right at first. And, I was amazed at them all being together, kind of the kindred spirit, the open arms with which we were accepted. We had some trepidation. I'd like for them to talk a little bit about it. When he was arrested in Philadelphia, we were on record as opposing the death penalty, and I hadn't expected to get into this tonight at all, but we opposed the death penalty and got into a bit of a kerfuffle with the DA and to the police to some extent. Had a very public tit for tat in the press, and ultimately we prevailed. And one of our concerns when we went out there was that we realized I can't begin to explain, or fully understand what Kristen and Chris and Cassidy and everybody else went through, but can understand how they might feel about what should happen to the guy that was doing this, whatever you want to call him. And we were a little bit concerned that some people might be upset that we had put a roadblock in the way of having this guy put to death. And we actually were accepted with, I think I would characterize, open arms and relief for what we had done. And Kristen and Chris might explain a little bit of this. Catherine Hay was his defense attorney in Fort Collins. We actually met with her, and she explained that they signaled fairly quickly that if he didn't face the death penalty, he was willing to plead guilty for all of the assaults, both in Colorado and in Pennsylvania. There were 6 assaults in Philadelphia. There were, I believe, 8 women ultimately either attacked or attempted attack in Fort Collins. There was only 1 murder, so there was only 1 case where the death penalty was pertinent. Catherine Hay explained to us, if he faced the death penalty, they were going to fight the charges in Colorado. She said that it would take at least a year before he went to trial there. She conceded that he would be found guilty, but they would appeal. And she said that would take more time. She said till they got him back to Philadelphia, it would take at least a year for him to put together
I want to say
trial there,
that
death penalty case.
We are
there.
incredibly lucky that
in terms
of
she said if
pleading,
if that's what he's facing,
us not having
that's what
to deal with the trial,
this
case not being drug out any longer than it needed by lawyers.
They actually negotiated a plea deal in Philadelphia.
Legal logistical crap that goes along with it.
He conceded all the cases.
The first time I went to court and saw him, I collapsed. I had never seen this face besides a composite sketch or his mugshot on the news.
To the people that survived these attacks,
being in the same room with him,
than I can. They would have had to
buckled
go on the
me,
stand.
Every bit of me.
They would have had to testify repeatedly.
I was terrified to have to sit through a trial, and this was a preliminary hearing, so nothing had been even talked about a plea bargain or anything with us. And I remember talking to my victim's advocate that the DA's office assigned to me, and I was expressing to her that I was terrified to have to go on the trial go on the stand, talk about what he did, talk about details, and relive that whole night again. And little side note, she said, well, I don't think you need to worry about that yet. And I stopped her and I said, no, you're my advocate, and that's what I'm worried about right now. So I need you to advocate for me. And then when we found out that he was going to plead guilty as long as he didn't face the death penalty, I felt nothing but relief. And quite frankly, I don't believe in the death penalty either. And I believe that it is fair and just that he spend the rest of his life in prison, and that is his life. I think sometimes the death penalty is getting off a little too easy. I mean, we hear about people in jail committing suicide all the time. They would rather be dead than be in jail. So let this man be in jail. Let him face what he did every day for the rest of his life, and make sure that he cannot ever get out and do this again to anyone else. So I was extremely thankful not to have to go through a trial, not to have to relive all of that. And I will also say that I'm glad it went down that way, but I also was completely in respect of what Sil and Vicky wanted, first and foremost. And I'm really happy it aligned with what I wanted. I'm sure you were. Everything that went on in the background, now that I'm aware of, like, I had no idea at the time what was going on. But again, I was very thankful. And I was very thankful that, I mean, quite frankly, one of his other terms was he wanted to serve his sentence in Colorado. I don't know if he thought Colorado was somehow going to be easier than Philly, but Canyon City is no joke, and that's where he went. And I was real happy about that. Well, and on a side note, I also want to say, that first time I saw him in court, I did fall apart. He looked right at me.
Even before you were attacked.
And after we were told he was accepting a plea and we were allowed to give statements at his sentencing, I was bound and determined to stand up right in front of him. And I looked right at him during my statement. And I told him, I will live a life that is full, and I will live a life that is good. And you won't. For the rest of your life, you will not. And that is fair. And that is what needs to happen, and that's what you
I agree with.
And standing up there, I would say to other victims, if
I agree with everything that Chris said.
Again,
it was a humongous blessing to not have to go up there on the stand. It was hard enough to be in the courtroom just breathing the same air as him.
As close to whole as you can ever get.
It was the biggest blessing.
And it's hard, and I agonized, and I was so scared, and I was nervous, and I was scared that I wouldn't even be able to put two words together in front of him, much less come off as anyone with even a junior high education at that point when you're so traumatized. But, you know, going in there was so hard and doing it was so hard. But walking out of there, I felt like I had just gained like 100 pounds of muscle. And that's really, really important for victims to know. Every bit of control and power that you can take back from your offender is going to serve you well for the rest of your life. Yeah, and everybody has to make their way through this journey in whatever way is best for them. And there's a lot of people that I know that have been raped and haven't even been able to come forward and haven't even told some of their family or anyone. And, you know, I think what's important is that everybody's journey and how we get there might be different, but those people are still doing the work. They're still able to find ways that they can move on with their lives and like I said, do those little things that they never thought they'd be able to do again in their life after being violated like this. So whatever that looks like for whoever.
How about you, Kristen? You had the opportunity
is what they need to do for them, and
to speak in front of
working
him as well?
in advocacy for so long.
I did have the opportunity,
really
but I did not have the courage at the time. And
I've always been this very strong, mentally strong person, emotionally strong person, and
I don't have.
I got into advocacy when
I wasn't in the headspace to be able to do it at the time. So.
Lakers player helped me.
Yeah, it is.
And that happened here in Colorado. And I saw this girl's face plastered all over all these tabloids, all over the place. And I was disgusted because her rights were completely violated. Whether it happened, whether it didn't, this girl's rights as a victim were totally violated. And I looked at all of that, and literally around that same time, someone from Fort Collins DA's office, an advocate with the DA's office, called me and said, would you be interested in speaking? And I said, you know what? Yeah, let's do this. And that's when I was like, this is another thing I need to do for me and for my healing, is to stand up and have a voice for people who can't use theirs or don't feel that they can use theirs. When I do that, and when I have done that, it's been for anyone who's been a victim, not just of sex assault, but of domestic partner abuse, of anything. There's too much focus on the bad people and not enough focus on the people who are victimized and the ones that need support. So that's what I did to help myself and to feel like I was doing something to help other people.
Yeah, that's true.
Mm-hmm.
It's very impressive. Very impressive.
Thank you for that, Chris, and Kristen, everything you've done.
Yeah. Chuck, you've been very quiet. Is there anything that you want to say, Kristen?
It's the first time in a show I'm speechless. In January, when I met with Mr. Schieber and I found out what they had to go through, then he handed me the letter from Bell and addressed to me with the line, so many failures. At least Troy Graves told the truth. I'm waiting for you and your boys in blue to do the same. Then when I first met Chris and was at Cassidy.
Yes.
I couldn't sleep that night. And I thought back and I thought everyone that worked in the Philadelphia Police Department in 1997 that had anything to do with any of these 4 victims should have to listen or at least talk to what I had to listen to, because they got off easy. And in my mind now, apologies are not good enough. But we allowed this all to happen in 1997 because we didn't do our damn job. And at least you were treated decently by the Fort Collins Police Department. Our victims were treated like shit. And we allowed this to happen. And by allowing it to happen in 97, we gave him permission to murder Shannon Schieber and commit another rape. Not only that, but to leave town and continue his reign of terror. And then we stand here.
Well, and Chuck, I want you to know that
information that they deserved and everything else.
Still, and I have had, I can't even count how many conversations about
so many failures,
what happened, how things went down.
I still believe that there's certain people that should be held criminally liable for what they did in 1997. There's no
way too many years in the making that this podcast is actually happening.
We call ourselves a police department.
That we're actually coming out, that Chuck's willing to come out
to anyone
and say,
anyone in this case.
Yeah. Systematic failure. We failed our victims. These poor women had already been brutalized, and then they just got brutalized by the police. And when you look at Fort Collins versus Philadelphia, all of us victims know each other. We were all there for each other.
And you know what?
I mean, Kim was right there with us through all of it.
Things will probably
I know
again.
That this case
and
took an immense
that's why
on
I'm
her
a firm believer now
personally and her personal life.
In Canada, they have this thing where they call case management. If the police don't do their job, they can be held.
She wanted him as bad as we wanted him caught. She wanted him caught.
They do this to colleges now, administrators in colleges.
When I found out
stuff and everything else,
what happened in Philadelphia, and that these victims, who even knows where they are, they definitely don't know each other. They don't have each other.
You raise your right hand and you swear to do a job and everything
to give any support.
And then you go out there
because
and you don't do the job.
Just want to put it behind them because they were treated so poorly.
If you don't do the job, maybe you need to be up with
when I look at this case, it's night and day.
Apologies are
and
not
I know
enough
Fort
to you
Collins
girls.
didn't do everything right, but even if they had suspected that maybe a victim wasn't telling the truth, they still worked the job. Chuck, I've heard you say it. Do your damn job. They did their damn job, even if they had doubts. And well, and I flew to Philadelphia when the Schiebers were waiting for the verdict on their case, and I sat there in the courtroom with Belle, and it was very obvious that we were all the enemy.
We did. For 25 years, I held resentments against the Schiebers. I did, and I admit that. And it wasn't until I looked at that show and I saw the hurt in their faces, and then my partner died, that I reached out to the Schiebers. And I look back on this now. We should have told our lieutenant to go to hell, and we should have talked to the Schiebers, and we should have talked to Sean, and we should have pressed more. We have people that walk around and they pat themselves. You said one time, themselves on the back, and oh, look, we got The only reason that we even came close to even being involved or to getting him is that his DNA was in the system and we had it. I've said this numerous times. If he had left Philadelphia and never did another thing again, we'd have never caught him. Yeah.
You know,
Yes.
the grotesque thing is, you know, Chuck, you held out your hand and I took it. We heard recently that Sylvester Johnson, when he was commissioner, wanted to sit down with us and make peace, and the solicitor's office refused to let him do that. You know, what we were interested in, is trying to help you figure out how to clean the place up, and maybe actually hold the people responsible who are responsible for letting Troy Graves run free, for letting him not only murder Shannon and then rape another young woman down the street, but then move on out to Colorado. And my hunch is wherever he was in between Philadelphia and Colorado, there was probably a trail there as well. And somebody there wasn't paying attention, because he didn't go on a religious crusade for that almost 2 years between Philadelphia and Fort Collins. The damn pity is that the stubbornness to keep from admitting that the police department had done wrong kept it from opening up and really figuring out how to clean things up. You know, I think Philadelphia's made progress, but I know that there's still significant problems there. You know, 4 or 5 years ago, they had to go get $1.5 million to go test rape kits. You know, it was that had to be 1,500 rape kits that were on the shelves that they needed money to test. There was a big article in the paper a couple of years ago about the impossibility of finding a sane nurse in most of the hospitals there as a sexual assault nurse examiner. There are still issues there that ought to be addressed. The real pity is that we couldn't have worked together. I think we could have been a powerful voice, and we actually could have maybe come away with peace. You know, people talk about closure in these cases. There isn't closure.
There's no closure. No.
You know, when somebody in your family is murdered, it's a hole in your heart. You don't patch up the hole. There may be scar development that you can live with, but the hole is still there. There is no closure. Kristen and Chris tonight have explained that they have learned to deal with the scar, but they're not whole. They're not whole. And none of these women that this guy attacked were whole. The pity is that the whole system in Philadelphia made sure that you didn't talk to us, that you were angry enough at us, that you didn't have an inclination to talk to us, and were willing to work with the system to keep us from getting the answers that we were trying to get. You know, we got anonymous letters from police officers. I had a couple of people in the homicide department call me up and tell me that, you know, if I was in your shoes, I'd be doing what you are. But the system would not allow them to stand up and speak out and help try to correct things. It was all built to fight us, to keep us from finding anybody in that department who had failed to do their job. And you and I and a hell of a lot of other police officers that were in that department at that time know who didn't do their job and know what the results were because of it.
The thing that bothers me the most, the thing that I'll never get over, is that if we had done our job in 1997, we could have taken him off the street in September. 100%. There's no disputing that. We could have taken him off the street if they had known. They just had a series of sexual assaults in Philadelphia. They just caught the guy. They put it all over the press, night and day, everything else, and he was finally taken off the street. So maybe they did learn a lesson in that, because back then, anyone that was working in the 9th District was working with blinders on. They had no idea.
And I just want to say, and this is...
As Mr. Schieber has said numerous times, Shannon was
6.5 years ago.
She was by the Philadelphia Police Department.
My son and I lost his dad in 2002, and 6.5 years ago, I lost my son.
And for that, there's no apologies.
And it was ruled a suicide.
What can we actually say to any of you?
But his girlfriend was there.
Would make it right. We can't.
And it was in the midst of an argument between the two of them.
Total failures on our part.
And I had
So
to
many
track
failures in one
down
paragraph. She's
anyone
right.
to talk to
And I'll never
about the
forget that.
dynamics
I
of
have
their
that letter
relationship because
in
he
my
had been being
room, and I
abused
look
by
at it,
her
and
for
it
over
just-
a year.
because my name's on it.
I had to go find the
And
police and
I
tell
think
them
that
that they
this
needed to be
podcast,
looking
I
into
think
her.
I think that
But they got to that scene and
From-
someone made a snap
if you
decision
decide
that
you
this
want
was
to
a troubled kid who
become
killed
a
him.
police officer,
And quite frankly,
and you swear
they're
an oath, you
required to
should
treat
have
it
to
as a
listen to
possible
this
domestic,
and not
even
go
if
in there
he
and
did just
judge
kill himself,
right
and
away,
that's the
like,
end result.
well, I
But
know,
they let
well, I
evidence
know what
go.
happened here.
They
because
let
you
her
don't.
go.
You don't.
And there was
You
a
have
lot
to
of
listen
stuff
to
missed.
the victims, like Tommy McDevitt said.
And
Jimmy
another
and
police
Ray talked
department
about Mr. Schieber, how
just
victims
failed me.
remember things and stuff, and not.
And I will never know
we're
what
so
actually
damn
happened that night
prejudgmental.
because they didn't do
we
their
know what
jobs.
happened.
They got
I used
there,
to
they
work
made a
with
snap
guys.
decision,
They always
and
had
they
a theory
didn't
on a job.
handle it the way that
Every
they should
time the
have.
phone rang, oh, it's drug related. Find out it wasn't drug related. We had a mass shooting.
So
you know
if
what it
there's
was
a
over?
lesson to be
a
learned,
broken clutch in a car.
it's not just sex assault.
With
It's
one
not
guy.
just
it's drug related. It's drug related.
burglaries.
Right away,
It's not
he
just
knew.
traffic
He didn't know
stops.
anything. We
It's
never
not.
talked to anybody. I just
Police are there to protect and
tonight
serve.
was. I
And
know
when
I just
you've
said
been
stuff now,
victimized,
but I've been speechless.
You need the
tonight.
police on your side, not working against you. This was a trouble. And Chuck, I agree with that, but I'm also going to say when you've just had someone violate you like that and you have the strength and the courage to call 911. When you're holding that phone and you're dialing those numbers,
We sure didn't do
and then
that.
they come and they treat you like shit. And I'm all an advocate, and I am an advocate. I'm an
have a
advocate for
wife,
myself. I'm an
2
advocate
daughters, 3
for
granddaughters.
anyone. But
And I worry about them all
when
the time
somebody
now
steps
because
on the scene and they make a
I see
judgment
what's out
call,
there, and
that
you made
then
a
fails
perfect point, and Jimmy and I
the victim.
and Ray have talked
And
about
let's face
this.
it, what is it?
If you
4%?
think that
4%
a guy like
of
Troy
people
Graves is
wrongly
1 in a million,
accused.
you're dead wrong. They're all
That
over
means
the place out there.
96% of the time the victim is telling
You
the
know, he
truth.
did more jobs in Philadelphia than
So
that he
err
was
on the
charged
side
with. He
of the
just,
victim
you
is
know,
probably telling the truth,
the
not
victims.
well.
They lived,
she's
so they
you know,
didn't. You
she
know,
had too
they
much to
didn't want
drink,
their
or
life
she doesn't
changed,
even know
or
what she's
whatever.
talking
Whatever
about,
their
or she
story
had books
was,
on
they
her
didn't come
table
forward.
about sex assault.
Right. He pointed
Like,
one place.
these are
told
not
us
things
where the
that
one
factor
was. It
into
was
what
on a
happened
little
to this
street
human being, and
right
this is
by
a human
Rittenhouse
life.
Square.
These are lives.
And of course,
These are
so,
lives that
I
are
mean,
never the same, no matter what you do. But as a police officer, if you treat it
so many
poorly,
of them out.
they're never going to call another cop
so
again.
many of them out
They're
there
never. I mean,
that
they're
women-
never going to trust the
I might
police
say
again
this
with
to
anything.
everyone now.
And I can tell you honestly, when the police came to my
You don't
door
have-
the night
don't trust.
that my son
I shouldn't say it like that.
was
Don't-
gone, is when
be
I
your
looked
own
through my
advocate. If
peephole
you don't
and
feel
saw
that
2
you're being
cops on
treated
my
by the
front
police,
porch, I was
bitch and moan. Go
traumatized all
somewhere.
over
You gotta
again.
go somewhere.
Not
Go to
just
the
knowing
DA's
that
office. Go somewhere.
this can't be
But
good,
Yeah.
but
some
that
police
my last
officer or some
interaction
detective
with
doesn't
police
determine
officers was
what
when I was
is
raped.
your rights and what you're
And
feeling.
I'm looking through
So
that
you
peephole,
you have to
and
react.
honestly,
I mean,
they
Chuck,
watched up telling me too. They treated me like crap. You get as you have.
You should not have to defend yourself.
no
Yep. See why?
truth.
Well, and Chuck, yeah, and we appreciate, on behalf of at least the Fort Collins side of this, this has been a long time in the making. This should have happened a long time ago. In terms of just shedding light on this case and letting everything come to light and to finally stop covering what happened. And for Sil and Vicky to finally be able to really truly have a voice that's unedited, non-scripted, that's not, so much of what they've done has been turned around to not be the message that they wanted to get out there, which was that if this happened in Philly, it's happened in other places. And we can't keep failing victims.
and when you do speak out and demand answers and demand correction, you can come up against an awfully powerful force, and you can spend a lot of time and you can spend a lot of money, and you can walk away because they can bring a lot of evidence, not all of it necessarily good evidence, to bear against you. It's hard to take on these systems.
Well, the one thing that the police department in Philadelphia was good at, we knew how to circle the wagons, didn't we?
Right. Why does
Yeah.
the investigator do not?
When the Indians
parrot.
were coming, we circled the wagons. We
Yeah.
weren't letting anybody inside.
Well,
You keep saying we, Chuck. It wasn't you.
Well,
I want to
it
make
was.
our
It was
our
us.
audience clear on that. It wasn't you, and you've taken some heat here. You're the one representative of all these episodes of the Philly PD.
Well,
You had no
where the
role
system
in
needs
not the 97
that
assaults.
right there is
You
where
weren't
the
brought
system
on
needs
until
to
98
change.
with the loss of Shannon.
Because
And
it's coming from
but you were in the
higher than
blind
these guys
too
that are showing
because
up
of
at
your
crime scenes.
colleagues and upper management.
And it's disgusting, and it needs to change.
But from Jeff and I should have trusted. I remember us talking one time, and I'm looking at his deposition that he gave in his case. I just got it from his brother. Jeff and I should have trusted our instincts, and we should have overrode our lieutenant and gone to the Schiebers when we were ordered. This is even before they handed us that letter that we had to sign. But when we were told by our lieutenant, we should have known something was up. We did, but we didn't trust our instincts. I don't want you to have any dealings with the Schiebers. Anything that has to be done is through me. I never heard of that before because we're the ones handling the investigation, and we should have trusted our instincts and said, go to hell, we're going to do it. And we didn't.
And Chuck, if you did contact the Schiebers, you probably would have been written up. You would have been disciplined, possibly
Definitely,
fired.
Kristen.
Insubordination, you know
and
how
I
it
have been
goes.
friends
Taken to the front.
Since 2002, we both
Rightly
have
or
watched
wrongly,
each other have to
that's
go through
would have been the
significant
situation
things
there.
And
Folks,
beyond just
girls
this
were
case.
coming on
And
You're absolutely
get
right, and
help
we're
where
hoping
you
this
can.
podcast.
Prioritize your mental health. Do whatever you
Absolutely.
can do to make you feel stronger.
But in Philly, when the police commissioner
Gosh,
wanted
I
to stand
would
up,
say just treat
and
other
address
people
it,
like
he even
they
got shut
matter.
down.
Because
That's
we're
when
all
the
walking
lawyers and
through
the
this
insurance
life, and
companies get involved.
Yeah.
Kristen, were you going to say something?
We're all dealing with things that are really painful,
Okay, I thought you did.
and we all need to
I just want to
treat
say
each
one
other
thing,
with
Jim.
kindness
I just
and
want to,
fairness and do
Chris
the right
and
thing.
Kristen, I want to
And
thank you both. Your bravery is a powerful force.
God bless you.
And we're so grateful for your trust in sharing your stories with us and our audience. Your voices are a vital part of this conversation, and we hope that this episode can be a small part in honoring the journey you've been on. And I know we're coming up on a quarter century here,
amen.
and it still hurts. And I'm so sorry that you guys have gone through that, and there's so many other things in your life that you've gone through too. And so sorry that that's had to happen. That's all I have to say, Jim.
Chris, Kristen, how about a few last words from each of you that we're going to wrap this up? Or wherever you want to take this.
Just even through the most challenging times in your life, know that there is another side. Do the work. Therapy is a beautiful thing. Support system is a beautiful thing. And lean into those that you trust, and there can be beautiful life after hard things.
Thank you for that. Chris?
Thank you, gentlemen.
Willie Nelson turned 90 years of age. He released an album. There's one of the songs on it starts off, live every day as though it's your last one. And one day you're going to be right. Treat everyone as you want to be treated. And see how it changes your life. Pretty good lessons, I think.
And
problem is there's so many people today seem to be just mean with each other. We somehow need to get back to treating each other as though they really are our neighbor, and we treat them with kindness. They'll respond appropriately.
golden rule, treat others as you would have them treat you. And that's how the world should be. Folks, I want to thank Chris and Kristen for being on tonight. Your stories are remarkable. We're sorry you ever had to be here for this, but thank you. Chuck and Sil, we'll see you next week, I think, with the police sergeant from Fort Collins PD, if everything works out okay. Ray, as always, thanks for being my co-host here on Cold Red. And everybody, just a PSA from the Rape, Abuse, and Incest National Network. If you or someone you know has experienced sexual assault, you are not alone. RAIN's National Sexual Assault Hotline offers free, confidential, 24/7 support in English and in Espanol. Call it at hotline.rain, RAINN.org. Text HOPE to 64673. Folks, again, thanks for listening to this episode of Cold Red. Check us out on the coldredpodcast.com. Thanks to our producers, Matt McLaughlin, Matt Robinson, Rick Schilling, our music conductor, and Ray, and on behalf of everyone else here tonight, thank you, and see you on the next episode of Cold Red.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Chris.
Thank you.
I really appreciate your spinal strength. That's you. You guys are tough.
I think we're